So need my glasses. It's got to that stage in life. So we're just going to crack on. And we've got the recording started, so at least we'll have everybody if people can't make it live. Good evening, everybody, and lovely to see some new names and faces that have joined us tonight. So for those of you who don't know me, I started this group up because my mare B was diagnosed with a couple of narrow spaces in between her dorsal spinous processes in around about T15, T16, which is pretty much the common area to find that, unfortunately. So as a vet and now an owner and rider of a potential kissing spines horse, I just decided to start this group up so that we can support each other, help each other along, and hopefully educate people as well that are either in the same situation as me or just want to know a bit more about kissing spines. We have sort of brought on board up to now saddle fitters and vets, and after the break we're actually then going to have a bit and bridle fitter and an equine physio and another saddle fit to the rider talk. They're all in the process as well after the summer break. So before I get started, I also just want to say my intention is not for you to feel like we really need to be 100% perfect to ride. I am definitely not perfect. Nobody is perfect, but so I don't want to put people off riding. That it's just you have more insight into how we can be actually affecting our horse's spine and how we can actually then make changes for the better to improve our horse's welfare. So let's get started. So topic is, as we can see, as riders. So I'm just sharing my. That should be us now. Okay, so topic, as we can see here, is how we as riders affect our horse's spine without actually realizing. Okay, so there's a couple of people that I would really like to thank here this evening. So Maria Hallring of Ergo and Simone Ravenel, they have both provided me with some fabulous images and photos, and Maria also has a group. So if anybody is further interested in how the rider, the saddle, the horse all interact with each other, Maria has a group called the Vertical Balanced Riding Group, and there's an English version and a Swedish version. My Swedish is definitely not great, so I went for the English version. Definitely it's worth looking into, and you'll definitely get more info there as well on the subject. And third person really I do need to thank here is the IT man beside me, John, because without him there wouldn't be a PowerPoint. So just very quickly, you hate this bit. I've been sort of in equestrian for 40 years, quite hard to believe, and managed to get up to 4-star eventing a long time ago and just kind of do a bit of jumping now. Over 20 years experience as a vet, and then a few more qualifications since then. So there's a couple of diplomas and other sort of personal training and riding specific personal training and coaching and things like that as well. So just brush over that. The reason why I created Equimech was my interest in rider asymmetry started when I realized that different horses that I rode, after a while, they gradually started to develop the same movement patterns. So I began attending Pilates classes, and the difference that I actually made in my riding was really quite dramatic. So from there, I wanted to know more. Unfortunately, I always want to know more, but that's besides the point. I started then new studies in biomechanics and retired from veterinary in 2015. Haven't looked back, and I now train under Equimech as a biomechanics and personal coach, specialising in equestrians. And I assess and train all types of riders, from amateurs to professionals, and I've actually received referrals from rider coaches, saddle fitters, physios, farriers, and even vets, which is one of the reasons why I've been kind of forced to do this talk as well. That's next weekend's pleasure. So kissing spines, as we all know, here's just a bit of an image. From certain studies, it's one of the, or if not the most common cause of back pain, primarily found under the saddle area. So usually T13 to T18, most commonly around T15, which is unfortunately where we are sitting. And whilst we don't know exact causes of it, certainly there are going to be things that are going to predispose horses to the condition, and also things that are going to make it worse, like poor core, weak back, poor saddle fit, and how the horses are managed and ridden. And the horse, the saddle, and the rider really are totally interdependent. You cannot really isolate one from the other. With the horse, there's going to be sometimes slight genetic predisposition. Thoroughbreds tend to get it a bit more often than others, but to be fair, thoroughbreds, racehorses are ridden in extension a lot as well, so the environmental aspect of that may be a factor too. Obviously, horses' conformation, their age, old and young, would be more inclined. Old and young would tend to have weaker backs, obviously. And then if your horse is actually obese or are quite overweight, if you think about how much more stomach contents, intestines, viscera, what they're having to carry, that again is going to put an extra strain on the back. And if the horse has suffered any injuries like SI injuries, hind leg lameness, all that kind of thing, that's also going to have an impact, on the horse's spine. So hopefully you can see on the video there, this is a horse that's obviously in a lot of pain with the wither pinch. You can just see the horse really reacting and dipping away from that. Next, the saddle. So poor saddle fit was covered actually in the previous webinar, but it can obviously have a massive impact on your horse's comfort as well. And then finally, the rider and the biomechanics. So these are the four main areas that I'm going to be covering tonight as far as the primary rider issues are concerned. And then there's also secondary, to do with the training and the equipment that's involved. So what is rider biomechanics? So rider biomechanics really is just how the rider's body moves and interacts with the horse. Optimal biomechanics is fundamental for maintaining balance, clear communication, and overall harmony between the horse and the rider, which leads then to better performance and horse welfare. So here we have an example, again, kindly given to me by Maria. And the first image really is just, this is a 4-year-old that was ridden in a sort of a 4-year-old display class. And as you can see, the horse's rib cage is dropped down to the right-hand side. The rider's right foot is lower than her left. And you can see the rider's pelvis is then dropping over to the right-hand side. And so to compensate for that, we've got an over-rotation through the shoulders and a head tilt, and probably a bit of shortening through the left waist. And that's obviously going to put some stress and strain on this 4-year-old's back. And same horse, same saddle, different rider, who you can probably all recognize even from behind. Within 5 minutes, this rider had changed this horse into this picture. Now, the pictures I know are not taken at exactly the same steps within the gate, but you can still dramatically see that the saddle is pretty much down the center of the horse's back. That white area on the saddle is quite handy. The rider's pelvis is in the middle of the saddle, and she is very straight and upright, and you know the horse is making a much better turn, and there's no dropping of the horse's rib cage down to the outside. Just another example here of what then the horse could be then feeling or would be feeling. This was a study with 3 different riders under the same or riding in the same saddle. So in the first picture, we've got, you know, quite good, well-distributed pressures. As you can see, the pressure scale is on the right-hand side, and the pinks and the reds are when it gets to maximum pressures. And the rider in the first top box most likely is in a neutral pelvis and also has weight. You know, she's supporting her own weight down her thighs. Box in the middle, the weights for this rider, we're just starting to see the pressures change slightly more to the back of the saddle, a wee bit more on the left seat bone compared to the right. And then finally, bottom box, this rider, the saddle does not suit this rider at all, and the pressures are now concentrated to the back of the saddle, and the left seat bone is obviously a lot more weighted, or there's an awful lot more pressure coming down onto that horse's back on the left sort of seat bone area of that saddle. So again, it's just keeping in mind that everything is connected. That the saddle has to fit the horse, but the saddle also has to fit the rider. Otherwise, the biomechanics of the rider are going to be affected as well. So this video really was just to use to highlight, again, we can affect how the horse moves through their rib cage, and really I've only just started to become more aware of the rib cage rotation again through Maria Halloring and doing a bit more studying into this. And generally what should happen in a normal situation is the horse's rib cage should actually very slightly drop to the inside, because that's how the spine and the ribs are going to work to help the horse bend through the turns and the corners. Now, what generally happens is we are told to look in the direction that you want to go, or turn your shoulders in the direction that you want to go, or even turn your pelvis in the direction that you want to go. But the problem with that is if the rider isn't actually able to isolate those movements to just the head turn or just the shoulders, unfortunately, what tends to happen is the rest of the body comes along for the ride, and we tend to weight the outside seat bone instead of trying to keep the weight either in the middle or very fractionally to the inside. And the barrel is very unforgiving, even with the straps on it. So you can see there, just by me turning shoulders, turning my head, that the barrel starts to rotate, and you get this counter rotation of the rib cage down on the outside, which is going to put more stress and strain on the horse's back, because it's not its natural way of bending and turning. And obviously, if we're starting to stress and strain the back starts to get sore, back gets tense, and the horses are not going to want to use their back in the correct way. They're going to tend to go into extension, and we're going to keep those spaces between the processes tight and narrow, and you're not going to get that nice rounding and flexing through the back. So another part of rider biomechanics is balance and symmetry. Basically, it's just how well the rider distributes their weight, and we have to consider this in all three dimensions. So we consider it in front to back, left to right, or side to side, and then also in rotation. So this is a common sight. You would see this a lot. What we kind of call the armchair position. Ideally, we want to have our weight spread over our entire pelvis, so pubic bone, pubic arch to the seat bones, and then down the thighs. So we've got as much of our weight sort of distributed over as big an area or surface area as possible. It means that then the rider is actually supporting their own weight and they're in self-carriage. So you're pretty much squatting over your feet. And we're aiming for this ideal plumb line of shoulder, hip, and heel, which this rider is really never going to achieve in this saddle. It could be there's several reasons for this. It may be the horse's rib cage is too wide for the rider. The saddle could be too wide for the rider. The stirrup bar could be in the wrong place for the rider, and also the rider's biomechanics. So if the rider is tight through her hips, and also maybe prefers to feel like she's behind the movement. A lot of riders like to feel this position because they feel safe. They feel like they've got more horse out in front of them, so they feel like they're in a much safer place. But you can just imagine how much effort this rider's going to have to put in to get into a rising trot, or I would say light seat would be virtually impossible. And even, trying to get over a fence, a jump position, that they're really having to crawl back up from being away behind the horse's movement. And that in itself can lead to issues, as we'll see later on. The problem with this position also would be, obviously the weight is going to be directly down into the back of the saddle, and also riders find moving out of this position to a more correct position. They find that really quite scary, because they feel like they're nearly tipping forward, and they've got nothing keeping them safe. Then we can think about the balance of the rider from side to side. So again, this is going to cause sort of discomfort on the horse. We've still got potentially this rib cage rotation occurring. Again, the rib cage is dropped to the left, so the rider's left leg is longer. The stirrup is longer on the left side compared to the right. And the saddle then also drops and slips to the left. And then the rider has to compensate. So I suppose it's kind of the chicken and egg here, which comes first. And with a bit of help, you can see that the rider has actually got, within, I suppose, 5 or 10 minutes of some on-horse correctives, you can actually see that there's a massive change in where those stirrups have ended up. Yes, we've still got some external rotation of the right foot, but using a band, which Andy Thomas would have used, you're basically putting the band from the outside shoulder to the inside heel. That has two actions. It will get the rider to activate more muscles in the posterior chain and down through into that right hip. And it also makes them more aware of where their center or their midline is through the cerebellum. So you can see there's already a big change in that rider's position, and that in itself is going to have a positive knock-on effect on the horse, because if the rider can start to become more aware of where their body is and actually make adjustments of their own. So if that rider constantly thinks about, trying to keep the ribs more to the inside, weight more down the inside leg, they're going to actually be able to start to counteract the rib cage rotation that the horse has. And it's really just developing, better awareness for that rider as well, or for any rider, that if you're more aware of what you're doing, then you have a better chance of actually correcting it. So here's just another video provided by Simone. So again, it's just really to display or show the kind of pressures that unfortunately some of our horses really are suffering with. And this is, again, it doesn't look terribly drastic in the video, but if you watch, when the horse's left hind comes off the ground, that allows that rib cage to really drop down to that left hand side and rotate. So the rider's left leg really drops down. You can see there's more of a drop of the rider's left seat bone more than the right. And so when that rider drops to the left, we get that horrible high pressure on the right wither. So the saddle is basically hanging on by the right wither. So obviously that's every stride of walk. That's not just mounting, that is every stride of walk, and it's going to happen in trot and canter as well. So it's really just trying to remember that we need to have everything as optimal as we can. So I'm not going to dwell on this terribly long, but basically that just our sheer physical presence on our horse is going to cause them to go into a degree of extension. If you imagine, we are sitting in the middle of their back, and their back is literally like a suspension bridge. So it's held, spine is held at one point at the wither, and it's held at the other point at the pelvis. And unfortunately, obviously, I know the front legs aren't, the front legs don't have a bony support to the spine, but we are really sitting on the weakest part of their back. And as time goes on, I really do feel that it's going to become much harder for equestrian sports. I mean, the modern pentathlon has been changed from riding to cycling after the Rio Olympics there, and I really think the social license to operate, how riding is perceived by the general public is really a very important thing to consider. And the guidelines at the minute are that the riders should really be between 15 and 20%, including tack of the horse's body weight. And obviously this is very much going to depend on how, the condition the horse is in, its build, is it a stocky cob, or is it a thoroughbred with a longish back? Also whatever activities you're going to do with the horse. So is it faster turns, or is it just happy hacking? All of this has to be taken into consideration. But just really as an example, kind of take your kind of average 16 hand warm blood, probably going to be about 550 kilos. 15% of that, including tack, is in and around 82 kilos. So that doesn't sound too bad. The problem actually is when you go up into trot, we double our weight, and when we go up into canter, we actually 2.5 times the forces that our weight. And if you imagine, sometimes there may only be one of the front legs down on the ground in canter. So there's a reason. The studies have been done on this, and they have actually noticed there's changes in the horse's biomechanics as little as 12%. But it's just to take into consideration that we need to just add everything up, tack and our body weight. Okay, so rider posture and core. So the rider's going to be holding their position in the saddle through muscle tension and how the joints are lined with gravity. And there's loads of things that are going to affect your posture on a daily basis. It could be lifestyle, if you're at a desk a lot or driving, if you've had any previous injuries, how you feel when you're riding, you know, if there's a bit of fear and anxiety there, where the saddle puts you, what shape your horse is, and really your own kind of biomechanics and fitness. All of these are going to impact your posture and position in the saddle. This photo again is just really showing another common default that I would frequently see, where generally with probably maybe the more anxious rider, you tend to see this tipping forwards, knee gripping, heels rising, and the low hands. And as far as the horse is concerned, what they're going to feel in this is there's going to be more weight to the front of the saddle. And if the rider really is knee gripping, they're going to feel a bit of restriction around the shoulder blades as well. So again, it's not going to be terribly inviting for them to, you know, flex their spine, but they're still going to be tense, and they're still probably going to try and extend their back away from the rider in this position. Oops, never worked with animals and children. Again, this is just to show, you know, how the posture and core can affect the lateral balance, and it's also something to consider, you know, when you're jumping too, that if you can just imagine the forces this horse on the left is certainly experiencing and trying to counterbalance itself against where the rider's placing themselves. And again, there's going to be quite a lot of muscular effort and bracing through their spine to try and keep themselves, you know, in a semi-upright position. Another aspect of biomechanics really is how in sync are you with your horse's movement. So, you know, obviously we would see this every day. We've got riders that maybe aren't quite so balanced as others, and there's actually been quite a few studies done now where the asymmetry that's seen on the horse is also mirrored on the likes of the Swiss ball. So the studies actually have determined that the more we work on our own asymmetries off horse, that improvement actually then is brought into our riding as well. So it means then that by working on off horse exercises, we improve our own balance, our core, and generally our overall riding performance. It's also going to, you know, reduce our risk of injury, and it's going to hopefully have our horses far more comfortable and happy to receive us on their backs. This is again just an example of more than likely, although I know it's a still photo, but more than likely there's going to be a lack of synchronicity here. So this rider is quite high out of the saddle for rising trot, and more than likely we're going to land with a bit of a bump. Although to be fair, the heel is pretty much underneath them rather than her falling back into the chair seat. But you can imagine every time this rider lands, this horse is going to tense. It's going to tense up, and these pressures get worse the kind of more out of sync we get, because as the rider comes down, you can imagine the horse is actually going to be coming up in areas of its body at the same time. So you're going to be getting a real clash of pressures. And again, it's just really not going to be helpful for allowing that horse to use its back correctly. Another way we interact with the horse is going to be through our rein and leg aid. And if the rider's not in self-carriage, unfortunately, we then tend to have to rely on the reins and the stirrups for balance. And then that means that we're hanging on to the rein, they're getting more pressure in their mouth. We're trying to balance from that. So they think we want them to slow down. So then if we don't want them to slow down, we're having to use more leg to speed them up. And things just all start to get into, unfortunately, a bit of a muddle for the horse. And another area where it will be affected too is if we're not in the middle of the saddle or in the center of the saddle, if we're constantly off to one side. Horses tend to follow our weight. So if we're off to the right, we're going to end up using more left rein to try and keep the horse straight. And we're going to end up trying to straighten the horse maybe with more right leg. So we end up just using more pressure for an aid than really would be ideal. This is just really an example to show you where the weight actually goes. When we lean back, as long as we're not actually hanging off the rein, when you lean back, the pressure will go to the back of the saddle. When you start using the reins for balance, you actually then bring the pressure to the front of the saddle. So no matter what, unfortunately, if we're not in that kind of nice neutral pelvis and vertically balanced shoulder hip heel, the horse is going to feel more pressure on its back. When the pain starts to arise in the horse's spine, you tend to find that their smaller postural muscles are going to switch off first up, and that actually happens in humans as well. So the wee multifidus muscles, they will switch off. Then the bigger kind of longissimus muscles, the big long muscle on the back, it then has to be recruited to take over the work of the postural muscles. And that's when you tend to get the real extension through the spine. And when you palpate, if you palpate, or if your physio or chiropractor palpates your horse's back and they're really flinching away, that's when unfortunately the pain has arrived in those bigger superficial muscles. So unfortunately it's nearly self-perpetuating. So this is actually just a picture of the flexi curve drawings that you can get, that you take at the withers, and also the longitudinal profile of the withers is the bottom line. So saddle fitters will use this flexi curve at the wither, and then just about a hand's distance behind the wither, so that you're sort of behind the shoulder blade area. And Maria Hallering has studied about 1,000 horses, or over 1,000 horses now, and she's compiled data from these readings, and from the angles of the wither, and also looking at the longitudinal aspect of the spine, she's starting to get a feel for what angles are okay and what angles are not, and the horse shouldn't be ridden until other work is carried out, whether it's groundwork and physio and chiro work on top. The problem is that if the wither area starts to get very atrophied, there's nowhere really for the saddle to sit. So we end up putting narrower and narrower saddles on, and then the horse has nowhere to go as far as trying to develop a top line again. And unfortunately, a lot of the top event horses are just starting to look a bit like they are lacking in top line. So it's actually really quite a cool thing to do, that if you follow, if you get a flexi curve and just start to take your own. I've started to do mine, and it's quite nice to follow, because you can see how your horse's back is changing from kind of one month to the next. Again, this is another quick video just to show, again, from Simone, that again, saddle fit. So this is an example of a saddle that was too wide for this horse, and again, we're in canter, so we're relatively fast, and we're also turning. So we've got centrifugal forces, and we've just got the acceleration, deceleration of the canter stride. And it just shows that on one rein, so on the left rein, we have the weight and the pressure's increasing again on the inside wither, and on the other rein, it then swaps, and it's on again so on the right rein, then it's on the inside, on the right side of the wither. And again, you can even see that the feet start to drop to the outside as well. So again, it's just how the saddle, the imbalance of the rider, poor posture of the horse not being able to carry the saddle correctly, all are going to have a, unfortunately, detrimental effect on the spine. So this is where this is really more, I suppose, the secondary effects that the rider can have, and not necessarily the direct physical impact that they have. And I just want to show a couple of comparison photographs here. Certainly sort of 20, 30 years ago, I would have been told that, oh, you've got to get your horse long and low. And that's pretty much what I did and what I thought I was doing correctly. I suppose I thought I was probably lengthening my horse's spine by letting them stretch their head and neck down as far as I could get to the ground. The problem with this is that you can actually go too long and too low, where you actually switch the longissimus muscles off, and then the back is really then only being supported by the smaller, tiny postural muscles, if they're still working okay, and then the ligaments. And problem with this is that if you ride the horse long and low in front, you're still riding them down onto their forehand. So in this photograph, you can see that the foreleg, there's quite a triangle, I should say, between the two front legs, and the weight bearing front leg is really far under the horse, and that is actually going to block the hind leg from stepping under enough. So the hind legs are still going to stay out behind the horse, and the horse is going to stay in a relative degree of extension through the spine. And even if you look at that photograph, the horse does look like it's slightly running down onto its forehand. You could even say there's maybe a slight dip in front of the rider's hands. And unfortunately, this is kind of what we probably, the majority of us would take as normal. The problem also with this is that the horse isn't actually using elastic recoil. It's having to lift and drag in place its front legs. So you start to get an overdevelopment of the triceps and the forearm. And then the comparison of that would be this is the same mare, same horse, and now the front legs, I know it's not again at exactly the same moment in time. It could have been taken fractionally later, but the foreleg is much more vertical. It's not away under the horse's body. The neck is actually looking like it's, and it's slightly better supported at the base of the wither. And you have a better picture as far as the back's concerned, and the horse definitely looks like it's more level between the withers and the pelvis. The hind legs produce the horizontal force, and it's the front legs that have to withstand or manage then that horizontal force and turn it into vertical force. Now again, as I said, there's no bony structure holding the front legs of the horse to the rib cage. It's only muscles. So what we really need to do is actually slow everything down, slow the horse's gait down, allow the horse time that it can stand on its hind feet. So the stance phase of the hind legs gets fractionally longer, and it then gives the horse time to stop falling forward, and it actually then allows the horse to carry itself better. And when the horse is better posture, it actually will carry the rider then with much less effort. This, I think, is really quite a dramatic difference. So the longitudinal readings that I was talking about earlier, that Maria was measuring. Just the wee laser thing. Sorry. So that would be obviously the longitudinal profile of that horse's wither there. And then if you compare to there is a massive difference in the profile of that. And this is only after 3 weeks of groundwork, specific groundwork. And then the other angle that Maria is looking at is the angle at the back comes down into that lowest point of the wither. And again, here it's far more gradual. So in 3 weeks, this horse is completely changed. So the thoracic sling has got stronger. It's allowed the rib cage to be lifted up. Although you can't see it in this angle, but I would imagine that if there had been a rotation of the rib cage, that has improved as well. And just by slowly walking this horse on a very slight decline and going diagonally across, backwards and forwards across the downhill slope, this is what has dramatically changed this horse's spine. Hilary Clayton, an American vet, she actually did research and studies on this in the 1990s, on the slow downhill walk. And if anybody's interested in knowing more about this, then I would definitely look up the Maria's VBR group, because this definitely can be transformational. Now, what I would say is that if your horse is really struggling with it, and after a week or 2 weeks of just this very slow walking, that there is no improvement, or the horse is showing more symptoms or gets more upset about doing it, then I would definitely be inclined to speak to your vet, because there could well be some other underlying issue rather than it just being a postural issue. Okay. Not gonna talk too much about this. This wouldn't be my favorite topic of conversation. Draw reins, other training aids in inverted commas. Unfortunately, I would say anything that is going to have an effect on restricting the horse's head and neck is not useful. Self-carriage in the horse primarily comes, I would say, from the hind end first and connecting over the back to the front end. It's not about head position. And with, again, I suppose you could go into all the neck issues that horses are starting to develop nowadays too. The only one out of that bunch that I would say would potentially be useful would be the equiband in the middle. At least there's no pressure on the head and neck, and it actually works supposedly through skin mechanoreceptors, and the band is supposed to be of a certain texture that it actually stimulates the horse's skin, and they are reacting to that. It's not supposed to be actually the tightness or the tension of the band that's creating the movement in the horse. It's supposed to be through the skin mechanoreceptors. But the other ones, unfortunately, are all, I know they look like the side reins are nice and loose, but even looking at that horse and its neck, I don't think that's even a great advertisement for an aid. So I suppose all I could say is it's an individual thing. If you're using them, make sure you have a professional that knows what they're doing, and like everything, I suppose everything in moderation. But yes, let's move on. Okay, finally, so really this is just a quick run through on how I help riders. So I help riders through really them achieving optimal function and performance for themselves, and then this should have a knock-on effect on their horses, hopefully. And with those sort of 4 categories in the rider biomechanics, I would then work on the physiological causes of the issues. So There's a list of things there. So proprioception is really a key one for me. It's making riders just more aware of where their body is in space, and the muscle imbalances, again, quite often, the muscles work in pairs, and if one muscle's overworking, then another one is switched off, and it's on, it's going to be underworking. Unfortunately, with age, we tend to develop habits, poor posture, and tend to lose our flexibility. So again, just working on things like that, just trying to get us as strong and symmetrical as possible. So these assessments can be done on horse. So here we have a rider that I worked with, and again, within sort of 5-10 minutes, the change was quite remarkable. Again, using the Andy Thomas band, and just bringing that rider back into the center saddle and everything is a much happier picture there. And the horse, as you can see, was much straighter. And then there's other things that we can use with balls and sponges. Again, it's just activating and making the rider more aware of where their body is when they're riding. And the biomechanics assessment then can also be done off horse. This is really where I like to start. So you're assessing how they squat. That can give you a lot of information on muscle imbalance and tightness and restrictions. I would do individual muscle testing. I would look at balance. And then from that, they would be given a set of sort of corrective exercises to get them started with. So maybe just some gentle muscle activation and some releases. And then once they've started on that, I can also do the assessments online. Now, obviously, I can't, there's no hands-on here, but again, just working with various movements and balance tests and things like that. Excuse my face in that picture. We can get, a handling on where the rider is restricted and limited, and make a plan from there. And then from that, I write a program. So usually the program's for a minimum of 12 weeks, and it's broken down into 4-week blocks. And the program can be, if the rider wants to go to the gym, it can be based around gym equipment. If they want to stay at home, it can be based around whatever they have it at the house. And from the 12-week program, they either can continue on with me one-to-one, or they can join the classes. Obviously, if you're local, there's group classes that are on weekly, and there is also an online subscription where we have access to nearly 100 recordings of classes over the last number of years. And those classes range from Pilates, Improvers Pilates, Intermediate Pilates, Equipilates, rider conditioning classes. There's Pilates there, so if you want to improve your cardio, there's Pilates classes, and there's actually rider specific core ball classes on there too. So there's pretty much something for everybody. And just finally, there was a case study done for my biomechanics diploma, and I had 8 riders do an FEI dressage test, which was judged by Vanda Stewart, who's one of our highest level dressage judges now in Northern Ireland. So these riders did the dressage test, and then they did a full biomechanics assessment and then a 10-week program with me. And then those 8 riders were retested again at the same venue at my house and with Vanda. And all of the riders had an improvement in their dressage scores. One rider actually had a difference of 17%. So it really is worth spending time on yourself as well as your horse. really I think your horse and yourself are going to reap the rewards. This is just really how some people have felt after either the assessment and some sessions with me, and hopefully in the future what I tend to do, or what I plan to do, is get really more kind of objective about it all, and try and get into some of there's apps that have been brought out. There's a Schlepp app and a logo analysis, and that's definitely going to make my work a bit more scientific. And I think actually from a rider's perspective too, I think it would be great if you could notice changes in how your horse is actually going, because an app has managed to, you know, analyze how your horse is moving, for better or for worse. So that's me finished. I would like to thank you all for listening, if anybody is still there. If anybody has any questions, I'm happy to hopefully try and answer them. You can either unmute or type or say nothing at all, or just say hello. If anybody wants even to say hello.
Hi.
Hi. Is everybody falling asleep? Is there anything anybody didn't understand, or everybody? I don't think any questions put up on the chat, did there?
Not the same. Oh.
Oh, very well explained. Thank you, Penna. I just certainly it's food. It's definitely food for thought. The whole, I think, rib cage rotation thing is definitely a new concept for me now, and explains a lot. You know, you'd hear about saddle fitters talking about horses having one shoulder bigger than the other, but I think this is now, obviously, unless a horse has got a chronic lameness on one leg, and there's definitely, you know, a lot of muscle atrophy on the lamer leg. I think this is the bigger shoulder, little shoulder thing is actually an optical illusion because of the rib cage rotation. But other than that, hopefully it's better weather wherever anybody else is, because the weather's been shocking today for everybody trying to make hay at the minute, and it's not been pleasant at all. Well, if there's no questions, all I want to say is thank you so much, guys. That's the 6th webinar in the group so far. Bit of a break. I have James Cooling, who's a bit and bridle fitter, lined up for the autumn, and Stuart McEwen, who's an equine physio, and then Steph's going to do another one on I might join her in that, to do with the saddle fit to the rider. And also very exciting news, because at the end of August, 31st of August, 1st of September weekend, I've actually got 2 girls coming over from England. Sarah Williamson and Anita Miles are going to come over, and we're going to do a weekend of groundwork and sort of exercises, things, rehab stuff that we should be thinking of doing. Doesn't matter whether your horse is kissing spines or not, it's just general kind of posture improvement and all that sort of stuff. So really I'm looking forward to that, which probably will come around pretty quickly, and hope it's good weather, because it's going to be here and we don't have an indoor. But other than that, thank you very much for joining me, and see you all have a lovely summer if we get the weather. Bye folks, bye.